We are very fortunate to have a very progressive Federal Secretary in Mr. Rizwan Ahmed in MoMA, who realizes the importance of such unconventional sort of topics and take all the initiatives which are necessary for the future generations. I would also like to recognize, the World Bank team, which has worked tirelessly on this. And this is just the beginning of, obviously, we are talking about a long journey. It's a long, winding path, but the step has been taken in the right direction. Can somebody put up my presentation, please? So here we go. I'll just warn you right at the outset that I will stretch from my time a bit, but I'll try and not to stretch too much. But nevertheless, just to prepare you at the outset. The topic of blue economy in Pakistan is one of paramount and grave significance, especially considering the encroachment of climate change. I'm very glad that MoMA and the World Bank has organized this webinar today on this very important and evolving topic. We are all learning about it from each other, in fact, on the go. And the presentations before me were very enlightening indeed. The Blue Economy Agenda advises states to expand their focus to include economic gains as well as considerations regarding long-term health and sustainability of the oceans and the marine resources and ecosystem therein. The global banking sector continues to play a pivotal role in enabling sea-based commerce and the exploitation of ocean resources. The three key elements of the ocean economy that are driven primarily by bank financing are sea-based trade, which constitutes more than 80% of the total global trade, sea-based infrastructure development, which includes investment in ports and related infrastructure, and marine fisheries development. Banks are instrumental in mobilizing capital for global trade, for seafaring vehicle financing, working capital financing, shipment financing, etc. This implies that banks are not exempt from the onus of responsibility for environmental degradation, and they need to play their due role. Unfortunately, the ocean degradation is at an all-time high. Paradigms of the past that had singular focus on GDP and caused the overexploitation of natural resources have led us to where we are today. In terms of the climate emergency, the loss of biodiversity, and even the outbreak like COVID-19. The blue economy approach encourages a progressive, ecological, regenerative modus operandi of using the ocean as a means of economic recovery. Now, the macro view of Pakistan's blue economy. Pakistan's ocean economy potential far outstrips its current meager contribution to GDP. Some of the key statistics for Pakistan's ocean economy are maritime revenue of $183 million, which is 0.1% of GDP. For India, for example, annual maritime revenue stands at $6 billion, 0.2% of GDP, and US $5.6 billion for Bangladesh, which is 1.6 billion of GDP as of 2019. Annual seafood export revenue 0.2% of GDP, $451 million case of Pakistan versus China, where the seafood export revenue nets approximately $19.2 billion annually, 0.1% of their GDP. And for India, the income from seafood export annually stands at $6.6 billion or 0.2% of GDP. Coastal and maritime tourism revenue, 0.1% of GDP or $300 million in our case. On the other hand, Bangladesh maritime tourism revenue are double that of Pakistan as of 2019, while India and China have $28 billion, 0.9% of GDP, and $227 billion, 0.1% of GDP respectively. Port revenue, 0.7% of GDP, is $70 million. Having more developed port infrastructure, countries like Bangladesh are outperforming Pakistan despite having a lower liner shipping connectivity index and a smaller coastline. Bangladesh's port revenue for the year 2020 stood at $0.34 billion. That of India is $0.86 billion. And from China, Shanghai port alone net $2.7 billion to China's GDP annually. These numbers doesn't present a very happy picture, as it reflects an element of underutilized and perhaps mismanagement of resources, imbalanced growth, and unrealized potential of Pakistan's blue economy. Pakistan's ocean economy also has much room for improvement in capacity enhancement of seafaring sectors, sustainable management of natural resources, and social economic inclusivity of marginalized segments of society. Pakistan's ocean economy, if managed effectively, can contribute handsomely to our GDP, estimated to be $8 billion in much needed hard currency revenues. Banks have the largest asset pool and the means to empower and facilitate growth through capital mobilization. Banks need to synergize with private and public sector stakeholders to realize the full potential of the blue economy in an environmentally conscious, sustainable way. When I talked about $8 billion of impact on the GDP annually, I did not take into account the benefits of the green economy, which comes hand in hand with the blue economy. Now, the role of the banks. Specific blue economy initiatives that can be enabled by financing offshore renewable energy production, decarbonization of maritime transport and fisheries, sustainable fisheries, aquaculture, algae farming, investment in robust solid waste management system, incentives for fishers to collect sea litter for waste processing, rebuilding marine ecosystems for carbon sequestration, funding of marine research, spatial planning, funding of maritime workforce trainings, subsidized financing for entities that meet MoMA's blue economy policy requirements, floor price for entities not meeting blue economy requirements, promoting awareness as such. All of this could not come to pass without the regulatory momentum from policy making bodies, and I'm very glad to hear from the Federal Secretary that he's very well aware of all of this, and this has been pursued at the national level. Stakeholders of blue economy should work towards formulating blue economy financing requirements and targets. Stakeholders may like to work to convert State Bank of Pakistan's green banking guidelines into binding regulations and accommodation for blue financing. Regulators may also incentivize investments into renewable energy production to alleviate our energy shortfall and to reduce dependence on non-renewable polluting fuels. And above all, the blue economy framework needs to be mainstreamed into the national agenda. Port infrastructure financing. As one of the three key elements of the ocean economy that are propelled by bank financing, resulting in increased contribution to GDP and job creation. A schedule of port and related infrastructure financing is presented on this slide, listing investments made as of 1997 by international financial companies, multilaterals like World Bank and the Asian Development Bank, and Chinese banks and financiers. Projects in the pipeline are also listed therein. The sizable investment over the past 20 years have helped bring up Pakistan's maritime revenue, but the contribution to GDP, as have seen, has been meager. And there are still challenges for banks and port infrastructure financing. Challenges particularly faced by the banks. Large-scale infrastructure projects are capital intensive, hence financing requirement is substantial, and considerable commitment from sponsors for equity, cost overruns, etc. are necessary. Similarly, tenure of financing such projects in the north of 10 to 12 years, preferably even longer, 18 to 20 years, which can only be financed by large banks, as mid-sized smaller banks are unable to take exposure on longer tenure projects, thereby restricting the availability of local financing. In view of SBP's requirement for financing certain amount of capital cost in foreign currency, arrangement of foreign currency financing is a prerequisite, resulting in increased project timelines and contractual requirements. Banks are often not receptive to infrastructure projects with no offtake guarantees or financial support from the government. Perhaps a specialized area needs to be established as had been done by all the significant global banks, given the specialized natures of this business. Enhancing the role of banks and multilateral financial institutions. Suggested measures for active participation from banks and multilateral financial institutions. In order for blue economy to realize its true potential, local banks should begin to take a commercial lending perspective with a progressive approach that is without direct or indirect government support and based on market dynamics. In order to achieve this, capacity building of financial institutions is required in collaboration with multilateral like World Bank, specialized shipping and transport financing institutions, parent ministry, MoMA, and key stakeholders such as SBP and IBP. Moreover, government through appropriate quarters may also closely coordinate and partner with global funding banks, funding agencies such as World Bank and NADB, and other large-scale credit guarantee providers to offer partial or complete first loss guarantee and other customized products for credit enhancement, at least in the formidable years of bank financing in the sector. The government should also ease out the regulatory requirements for promotion of blue economy related projects and incentivize the same in the form of subsidized financing, investment packages, fiscal incentives, one-window licensing regime, special economic zones, etc., and progressive regulatory targets for banks. The aforesaid measures will enable the banks to take a more progressive and active view for commercial financing of projects where government's participation as direct stakeholder is limited. The potential financing avenues for banks in this sector are enormous, to say the least. On the fisheries side, the fisheries contribute 0.4% of GDP. The sector employs around 400,000 people directly, and the number goes up to 1 million if you take into account the secondary jobs. Improving the value added in post-harvest value chains in the most feasible way to improve the sector's contribution. Creating an enabling environment in the fisheries sector. Government structure is fragmented. This is what is necessary. Government structure is fragmented. Somebody has already talked about it. Federal and provincial local government, increased coordination and stakeholder collaboration for specific sector-specific policies are required. The institutions like World Bank can play a role of bridge and coordinator in this respect. There are low government budgets for development of this sector. This certainly needs a relook, and more contribution is required directly from the government to make sure that they'll support this. Strategic financial support in the form of grants, loans and guarantees required from multilaterals for efficient and transparent delivery. The banking sector should increase its presence in this region, offering tailor-made financial solutions. Deal with the problem of overfishing. Need to move to a licensing regime and a stricter enforcement of measures. Underdevelopment of post-harvest processing. Lack of investment in value chains, especially cold chain facilities, has hampered Pakistan's exports to international market. Most importantly, capacity building and investment in equipment are required to improve output quality and efficiency of this sector. Storage facilities for fisheries, including cold storage and transit storage, needs to be heavily revamped. We need to invest in improving the sanitary standards within the fishing sector. Special economic zones already been covered somewhere. I'll just touch upon it. Marine economic development, blue economy demonstration zones, ocean economy development zones. These are the kind of specialized zones which are required for promoting the fishing related industry. Special blue economic zones in Pakistan could also greatly expand the output, efficiency and scale of the fishery sector. And I can assure you that the banking sector will support this initiative of the government all throughout in not only helping in building the infrastructure, but also extending the financing to the industries that will come into play there. Cluster development around key coastal centers in Pakistan. Federal Secretary already talked about it, but I am going a level beyond that. What I am suggesting is that it's not just developing of the fishing zones, but it's also developing a kind of special economic zone next to it, so that the industry related to blue economy could be harnessed and developed. Notable international developments in the area are India and China, who are actively working on this along with India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka and other countries which could be drawn upon for replication in Pakistan. In order to ensure real and quick impact in this sector, both conventional trickle-down and bottom-up approach must be pursued simultaneously. Small-scale fishermen are one of the most marginalized and unbanked groups and lack access to basic financial products. They are probably at the bottom of the pyramid. Data specific to this community is not available. Unlike agriculturalists, this community does not receive subsidies and there are no products tailored to their requirements as such. However, government-sponsored programs available to fishing community are Prime Minister's Kamyab Jawan Youth Entrepreneurship Program, Government's Markup Subsidy Scheme for Economy Housing. Keeping in view the importance of this underserved sector, a correct mix of banks support in terms of expansion and outreach and awareness creation, coupled with credit guarantee schemes can be an effective tool to capture this untapped market. Working on the same lines, we at the Bank of Punjab have been organizing roadshows along with country's coastal line to create awareness regarding banking services available to local fishermen. And I must again appreciate MoMA's initiative on this one. Zaid Saab, Rizwan Saab, all of them have been spearheading it, including the Federal Minister, Mr. Ali Zaidi, and played a due role in financing this marginalized community, and would like to share a very brief couple of clips in this regard.
अस्सलामुअलैकुम, मेरा नाम मोहम्मद हनीफ है और मैं रेडी गोश में रहता हूँ। बचपन से मैंने दादा और अब्बू को यही मछलियाँ पकड़ते हुए काम करते हुए देखा है और पिछले 2 साल से मैंने ये अपना काम शुरू किया है। मछलियाँ पकड़ के फिशरी में पहुँचा। पहले मेरे पास छोटी कश्ती थी, उसके बाद मैंने बैंक ऑफ पंजाब से लोन लिया और बड़ी कश्ती बनाई। अब उसमें बड़ा इंजन लगवाना चाहता हूँ ताकि मैं बाहर समंदर से ज़्यादा मछलियाँ पकड़ सकूँ। कामयाब जवान के लोन के बारे में मेरे पड़ोसी ने बताया, फिर उसने मुझे बैंक ऑफ पंजाब के नुमाइंदों से मिलवाया, फिर इसका लोन अप्लाई करना बहुत आसान था।
Now the housing one.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम, मेरा नाम मोहम्मद फैसल है। मैं ये यूसी रेडी 31 में रहता हूँ और मेरे 3 माशाल्लाह बच्चे हैं, 2 बेटे हैं 1 बेटी है। सबको मैं ही सपोर्ट करता हूँ और घर का बड़ा भी मैं ही। और मैं फैसल फिशरीज के नाम से कारोबार चला रहा हूँ फिशिंग का। अभी मेरी 5 कश्तियाँ हैं। फिशरीज से हमारी आमदनी काफ़ी अच्छी हो जाती है। बैंक ऑफ पंजाब में मेरा अकाउंट चल रहा था, मैंने बैंक में अप्लाई किया बैंक ऑफ पंजाब में कि मुझे घर के लिए लोन चाहिए, मुझे घर बनाना। जो रिक्वायरमेंट उनकी थी बड़ी आसान थी और मैंने उनको पूरी करके दी, तो माशाल्लाह वो मुझे उन लोगों ने लोन दिया। वो काफ़ी टाइम से मैं सोच रहा था कि मैं घर बनाऊँ, अपना घर बनाऊँ। अब मैं बैंक ऑफ पंजाब की मदद से बना रहा हूँ।
So now at the end, in the last slide, the lack of infrastructure and low capacity output of maritime sector can be remediated by targeted investments in infrastructure and capacity building, investments in renewable offshore energy production, awareness and education campaigns. Entities environmentally considerate can be considerations with the environmentally considered could be entities that actively neglect environmental considerations can be discouraged through the deployment of floor prices, pricing floor for financing, minimum financing rate that are dissuasively high will be reduced only upon compliance with blue economy policies. Investment in maritime research and planning. Overfishing needs to be countered. Solid waste management, treatment and disposal system. Bringing these peoples into fold, which the video you just saw, of prosperity and sustainable economic growth. Social inclusivity. I think this is the key about this particular sector when it comes to Pakistan. The concept of sustainability, eco-friendliness, responsible stewardship of nature and its perseverance must be intertwined with decisions of national economic policy as well as all investment decisions. The power to bring about real and lasting change is within our reach. To actualize it, key stakeholders must synergize and collaborate to achieve this crucial and noble goal. And this initiative of seminar is the step in that right direction. Thank you very much.